For the general public's information, Supervisor Raddick informed me today he will be absent for this meeting. Item 1 is approval of the agenda. I'll move it. Second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Items 2 through 9 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 2 is approval of the minutes of the May 14th meeting. Item 3 is approval of the claims. Item 4 from Board Administration includes A, approval of resolution for a tax suspension for initials MK. B, approval of resolution for a tax suspension for initials VR. C, approval of resolution of a tax suspension for initials PR. And D, approval of resolution approving petition for suspension of taxes through the redemption process for initials SB. And 5 from Board Administration includes A, approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcels also known as 3314 14th Street and 3315 13th Street for Tuesday, June 4th at 4:35 p.m. And B, approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcels also known as 3273 13th Street and 3274 14th Street for Tuesday, June 4th at 4:37 p.m. And item 6 from Planning and Zoning is approval to set the times and dates for 3 public hearings for the proposed zoning ordinance map amendment, rezone from agricultural preservation to the agricultural estates zoning district on parcel ending in 20001 for June 11th at 4:40 p.m., June 18th at 4:40 p.m., and June 25th at 4:40 p.m. And 7 from the County Treasurer is approval of resolution approving abatement of taxes for Woodbury County, Iowa. 8 from the County Sheriff is approval of lease agreement between Woodbury County and State of Iowa for occupying space in the SWAT garage located in the training center at 1600 County Home Road. And 9 from Human Resources includes A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions, B, authorization to initiate the hiring process, and C, approval to broaden the scope of the assistant county engineer position.
I'll move the consent agenda.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 10 from Williams and Company. We have Mr. Chad Regnier here. This is an action item to discuss and receive the Woodbury County's certified annual financial report for FY23.
Good afternoon. As stated, Chad Regnier with Williams Company. I brought Dustin Knipe. He was one of the main ones on this audit as well. I think you all should have a copy of the 2023 audit report in front of you. So we'll just kind of go over it, and then if you have any questions at the end, we can get those answered. Page 1 is the transmittal letter that you guys submit in ACFR to the GFOA, and that this is part of that requirement. It just kind of goes on to state what's kind of like all happening within the county, and just all the different opportunities and what's happening with the local economy. And so a lot of good information in there. Page 7 is the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. So the county received this award for their FY22 report, and we did submit for the FY23 report. So we'll get those results later in the year. Kind of skipping a few pages, starting on page 12 is our auditor's opinion. And so in the second paragraph, it says that in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. And so that's the unmodified or the clean opinion that the county always strives for. So you got the clean opinion there. Page 15 is the management discussion analysis. This is a lot of good comparative information between FY22 and FY23. So if you want to kind of see what the changes were from 23 to 22, you can look there. Page 23 is the statement of net position. That this is a very high level statement that you can't really make any management decisions, but it basically shows on a full accrual basis of accounting what the county owns and what they owe. So you're able to kind of use this to compare yourself to other counties. 24 and 25 is the income statement on a full accrual basis. Again, really can't make any decisions from here. Page 26 and 27 is the balance sheet for the major funds. And then the second to last column is the other governmental funds. So all the funds of the county are shown somewhere in this report. The smaller ones are in the back. For upfront here, they're all grouped together in this other governmental funds column. And then page 29 and 30 is the income statement for those funds as well. One thing that we always kind of point out is for the general fund, unassigned fund balance, how many days in unassigned fund balance does the county have? Which means that if the county didn't receive any revenue, how far those that fund balance would go. And last year you had 84 days. This year, technically there was 90 days, but some of the expenses kind of were like one-time expenses because of ARPA. And so then where like the revenue and expenses offset one another.
If you're willing to take a question, we got
Sure.
one from Mr.
Sure.
Taylor.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. So you strike my ears with the 90 days, so that's about 3 months.
Yep.
So roughly 25%.
Yeah,
True?
yep.
Okay, so on page 5, and I just wanted to highlight something because we've been talking a lot about fund balances and, reserves. You don't differentiate with the general fund based on any certain portion of it, how it's taxed. Is that accurate? Basically, the general fund is the general fund, whether it comes through general basic, general supplemental, rural basic, it's all in
Well,
that. Is
not
that-
rural, but so there's about 10 funds that make up the general fund.
Okay.
Because there's specific definitions, so you have, I don't know, there's maybe 5 different funds. You have general fund, you have special revenue funds, you have debt service funds, and then you have capital project funds. And then there's one that's not applicable to you guys. So if you don't meet the definition of those other 4 funds, then it gets just grouped in with the general fund. And so rural services, that meets the definition of a special revenue fund. And so that one is not in the general fund.
Okay, so rural is outside of that, but you're taking general basic and general supplemental,
Yes, yeah.
and you're putting them together, is that
Yep.
correct?
And then there's
Okay.
a few other smaller funds as well that are grouped in with the general fund.
Okay, so regarding that, then, and this is a year ago, so I just want to make sure that we're highlighting, this is June 30th of 2023.
Correct.
We were at 24.68% when you looked at general fund.
And that's
Reserves, is that correct?
Well,
Am
that
I
would be
reading
the
that right?
unassigned fund balance, which, if I find, which unassigned means basically it can go to pay anything, it's not being, let's see here. So the total, and I don't know if we actually say this on page 5, what the total, it doesn't look like that we do, but, because general fund has some non-spendable, it's pretty small, $13,000, which is
Yeah,
prepaid,
sure. Yep.
But then, general sup, so that's restricted, and so that has a fund balance of 1.3 million.
Right, so the simplest guy in the room, I'm just looking, what would you say our reserve level is
So-
at the end of 2023?
Well,
Is it-
so it would be essentially that
24.68%.
Yeah, because, that's, you could spend it on anything, essentially,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's important, I think, and because we've talked a lot about reserves and how we calculate that. You're positing in this report that 20% is a recommendation that counties have
yes.
on hand, is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And actually, this 24%, that is, again, a little bit, it actually probably is a little bit higher, because what we do is that we look to see what the unassigned So basically, if you take the $12 million and divide it by the total expenditures of $49 million, that should get you that 24%.
Okay.
But in that number, there's some money that you spent on ARPA. So the ARPA expenditures kind of cancel each other out because we show ARPA revenue in the intergovernmental, but then the total expenditures is essentially has that ARPA expenses in there. So if you took out the ARPA expenses, it was like 13 million, I think, in total ARPA expenses on an accrual basis for 23.
But that shouldn't have any bearing on our reserve fund balance level of 24.68%. Is that correct, or am I?
Well, that 24%, again, is just taking the unassigned fund balance divided by the county expenses. So then that way you can kind of get an idea of how much there is in the fund balance compared to your normal expenses.
Okay.
But in that expenses, there's probably $13 million of abnormal expense, which is ARPA, that you're not gonna have, typically going forward. So
But we're not gonna have for revenue either, correct?
But that revenue, again, it cancels each other out. So, because there's revenue and expenses. So when we're taking that revenue, since they cancel each other out, they're not in that $12 million of unassigned fund balance. Because again, it cancels out, so
Yeah.
it's not in there. But when we take it divided by the total expenses of 49 million, that ARPA expense is in that number. Where typically, like, last year, the total general fund expenses were probably like 36 million or something like that. So actually, if you didn't factor that in, your fund balance compared to your typical expenses is actually gonna be higher than that 24%.
So if I wanted to figure out June 30th, 2024, could I take our general fund, which is general basic, general supplemental, and divide it by the reserve level, just to get a general ballpark of where we're at in comparison to a
Well,
year?
not the general sup, because that's restricted.
Okay.
So but if you took your general and then divide by your general expenses, now you gotta make sure to not include the transfers out or anything like that, because that's not part of the expenses.
Okay.
Because you can decide whatever you want to do for transfers.
Yeah.
So Dennis, yep.
Dennis?
Yeah, I talked to Chad a little bit before. General fund basic, it'd be nice if it was broke down to general basic, general sup, and other funds. That's the way the state does on their budgeting forms. Because general sup may have a reserve of only 7%, where general basic may have a reserve of 34%, 40%. But when you add them together, it comes to 24%. So you gotta go by fund, general basic alone, general sup alone. And I've asked him if it's possible in future audits. I don't know if it can.
It'd be,
Break this down, general basic, general sup, it'd be a lot easier to understand, because the 24% is a combination of the two. Because right now, general sup's around 7, 8, 9%. General basic, is up there quite a bit, and we're using that for this coming year, and we use it for the current year. So it'd be a lot easier to understand, instead of just looking at, 24% and saying, wow, that's not bad, but you gotta break it down by funds.
yeah, if we
And
were
that's
to.
something if you can do.
Yep,
to help.
and it would all be dependent on, basically on, the standards, if they kind of let, Iowa doesn't set the standards, so, Iowa's budget is broken out different than how we have to show it as well.
So
But,
basically, there's the state format that Dennis works with and the auditing format that you
yep,
work with.
they're different.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah,
now I could ask, I think I've done that in past years, where you could break down the general base, general sup, give us balances there. But that costs extra money too.
Okay.
It's
Yep.
not part of the audit.
yeah, yep.
So
So,
that'd be helpful if we can do that in
sure.
the future.
Yep, yeah, and we should be able to, we can get that information, so. Okay. Yep. Then just kind of going on, page 32 is the balance sheet for the internal service fund, which is the health insurance and liability insurance fund. 33 is the income statement, 34 is the cash flow statement. And then page 35 and 36 is all the Trusts and agency funds all grouped together. They're shown individually in the back. Page 37 is the start of the notes to the financial statements, so there's a lot of good information there. There's one thing, one thing that was new this year, a new standard, was that if you remember last year, I talked about leases. It's essentially the same thing, but dealing with IT, so like your softwares, that you're essentially leasing software, having the right to use the software. Between leases and software, since they're so closely related, I think you guys had 17 different leases and software, where I think you were the second highest of all of our clients that has that. And so there was just a lot of work that went into that this year because of the new standards and how they're making us report those. Skipping forward, page 64 through probably 70 is just some required supplemental information that you can kind of take a look at there. Page 71 is the balance sheet for the non-major funds. So this is where we're showing all the different funds, the smaller funds individually. Page 77 is the income statement for those same smaller funds. Page 83 is the balance sheet for the individual trust and agency funds. And 89 is the income statement for those same funds. And then page 95 is the individual financial statements for Siouxland District Health, because it's a discretely presented component unit. So you got the balance sheet and income statement. 97, 98 is just another supplemental information. Starting on page 99 is the statistical section. So this is again part of the ACFR report. So there's roughly 20 different stat tables here. A lot of good information, a lot of comparative, 10-year comparative information where you're able to see different trends. So you can take a look at that. Page 125 is the start of the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So I was just going to point out that page 127 had the total of $12.5 million, which was the largest CFA that I know I've worked with you guys. Again, a good chunk of that is ARPA. Page 126, the very first line shows how much ARPA was reported, and that was $8.9 million. Earlier I said there was $13 million. This CFA is on a cash basis, where the financial statements are on an accrual basis. So that difference there and any additional ARPA funds will be getting reported in 24. Page 129 is our report on internal controls, that we don't test internal controls, but we just get an understanding of the internal controls. And then page 131 is essentially the same type of report, but just for the federal grants that we tested. Page 134 is our schedule of findings, that we had our material adjusting journal entry finding, just like we've had in the past, that if you have one journal entry, you have to have this finding. So 95% of our clients have this finding, so there's really nothing concerning there. Yes.
You might want to point out Part 1A. That's important because it's unmodified, it's not qualified. You can explain that.
Sure, yep, and that's what I had mentioned, that the report is an unmodified opinion, so that was the clean opinion. So that's, and then like 1B is saying material weakness and internal control, which is the journal entry finding. So, but again, we didn't have any issues come up during the audit, so. Are there any questions?
Just have a suggestion for the future. Thank you for this. You do an incredible amount of work, and I'm always impressed with, and same thing with you, Dennis, on this as well. One thing that may be good just for the future is have this the week before, and I think we may have more questions.
Sure.
But really appreciate your being here and kind of walking us through the
Yep.
aerial treetop overview and
Yep.
highlights, so.
Yep, I'll take that in consideration, yeah.
Just a
we'll get-
thought,
Yep,
but really appreciate it
Sure.
again.
okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, this will be available online, is that correct? Good. All right, I'll move to receive.
Second.
Second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. Item 11, for information, this is from the Iowa Drainage District Association. Mr. John Torbert is back with us for the annual report to the board from the Iowa Drainage District Association.
Good evening. Good to be here and to see you all again. Just bring you up to speed quickly on some of the things that we've been working on or are going to be working on behalf of the Drainage District Association. First thing I would point out is that last year we did a little experiment and did a one-day training session for drainage clerks or drainage administrators, as we're calling them now. This was something that was done at their request. They get together during our annual conference. They said, it would really be helpful to us if we did that twice a year. So we put together a meeting last July in Fort Dodge, and we did not have an agenda. We just invited people to come and sit down. I was there as the executive director. We had our legal counsel there, and we had our lobbyists there, and just had an open forum. And I didn't know, first of all, if anybody would show up. And I didn't know if we'd be able to fill 3 hours. I think we could have filled the entire day if we wanted to. So we had about 22 people there, got really good reviews on it, so we're going to do that again this year. That will be Thursday, July the 18th, in Fort Dodge at the Starlight Best Western. Our annual conference is scheduled this year for the first Friday in December, which is December 6th. That'll be again in Fort Dodge. Talk quickly about the legislature. We had all in all about 20 pieces of legislation that we followed very closely this year. One bill that we had hopes for surfaced last year, and that was a proposal that dealt with publication requirements. And it basically said that they were going to create a statewide website, and anytime you had notices that had to be published, you could submit them to this website, and that would fulfill your publication requirements. That didn't sit too well with the newspaper lobby and the media lobby, and that became very controversial, so they backed away from that bill last year. They came in this year and talked about it, but in the end, they're still talking about the possibility of creating a statewide website, but that's going to be optional. So as for now, you're still going to have to be doing your normal publication, and of course, the cost of that from a drainage perspective gets passed back to the members of the drainage district. We also had a bill filed early on, which was Senate File 2151. We registered as undecided on that bill, but it would have added a substantial amount of verbiage to the drainage statutes. It was 21 pages long. When I sit down and read a piece of legislation, the first thing I try to figure out is, okay, what are they trying to accomplish here? What is the goal of this legislation? And I read that bill and I couldn't quite understand. And in my first reading of it, there were some things that I thought potentially were good for drainage districts and you all as trustees for your districts, and some things that I thought were losses. But in the end result, it was, we decided to register undecided because basically what we had heard was the bill did not have any legs and was not going to go anywhere, and not to be too concerned about it, and that turned out to be the case. So whether we'll see that again when they come back in session in January, I don't know. The last thing that I'll talk about is we are part of a federal grant. We're one of the sub-grantees, and as part of that grant, what we're doing is working with counties that might have drainage improvements. And what we're saying is if you are going to do a drainage improvement and are going to do substantial replumbing in the landscape, as part of that improvement, maybe we should be considering some conservation practices being built into that improvement. Instead of just putting bigger mains in, which are generally what improvements are, maybe there's also a way to put wetlands in, or bioreactors, or buffer strips, or any number of different things which would make drainage potentially a more environmentally friendly process that a lot of people take issue with it for. So that is what we're talking about. The issue from your perspective is that you, as trustees, cannot legally assess for conservation practices. The only thing you can assess for is draining the land. So if there was an idea or a goal that we were going to incorporate conservation practices, that would have to be paid for by somebody else. But there are funding sources out there that make that available, that are willing to do that. I know that we have one improvement that was done in a county in Iowa. It was a multi-million-dollar improvement that incorporated water treatment wetlands. And those wetlands ended up being paid for by a state agency, but they were incorporated into the drainage improvements. So that is one of the things we're looking at for the future. Personally, I think that's really the future of drainage. I think the time when we can look at drainage as just getting water off the land is coming to an end, and we're going to be talking more about water management as opposed to removing water from the land. And with that, I'll respond to any questions.
Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I had heard a little bit of scuttlebutt down at the Capitol that House File 718 might have some imposition on a city's ability to assess in order to raise funds to buy long-term into a drainage district or make improvements. Is that anything that you're tracking? We have a small city in Woodbury County that has looked to this board and gone through quite a protracted process in order to constitute essentially their own drainage district, or alternatively, buy into or make a long-term agreement with another. And I know House File 718 has had some restrictions, and I was just wondering, is that anything that you're tracking in terms of an effect on a city's ability to levy and raise funds? Or
It's
is
not
that
something that jumps out to me.
Okay.
I mean, when I get back to the office, I'll take a look at that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, that would just, I
Sure.
think, be helpful informationally, and something that this board will have to eventually entertain, but it would be good
Sure,
to.
I'll take a
good to
look
know
at that and see
Thank
if
you.
there are some concerns. I don't think it passed. Did it, or?
Yeah, it has in the past, but I didn't know if the implications.
Okay, I'll
As
see
far
what I
as,
can find
it
out.
restricts us on certain growth. And so I didn't know if some of the, you're getting into probably the nitty gritty when we're talking about, the leviability for drainage purposes. And that's something that I was just curious.
We'll look
on.
into
Okay.
that. And I
Appreciate it
will
very
say,
much.
we scrutinize those bills pretty closely, and I have an attorney who also scrutinizes those bills pretty closely. So I hope we didn't miss that, but I will look into it.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Wasn't there another bill that maybe even passed the Senate that wanted to take away the creation of new drainage districts from the counties and move that to the state? Are you aware of something?
No,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I thought there was, which I would urge
No.
against that through
If
this
they want it,
process.
they could have it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the whole thing, is that through this process with Salix down there, I mean, it's been incredibly tough for us to manage on a county level when we can talk to these
Right.
people and go see them every day. That to imagine that all of it's gonna move to Des Moines was just like a shock, you know?
Well, the statutes, of course, on creation of drainage districts have been in place for 100+ years, and two or more landowners get together and decide they want to create, and I'm not aware of any amendments that were proposed to that section.
Thank you.
Sorry, last one. Waters of the US, is that something that, on the federal level, you all are still playing defense against, or is that? from a
Right now, it's
regulatory-
pretty quiet.
Okay.
It's something that seems like it's rears its head every time we have a change in administration. Right now, it's pretty quiet, and right now, the status is that drainage districts are not threatened by that water rule, but that could change.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you all.
Item 12 from Secondary Roads, County Engineer Mark Nera. It includes for action 4 items, first of which is A, award the truck quote for the tandem axle truck to TEC Equipment for $254,032.00.
Thank you. Mark Nair, Woodbury County Engineer. On the award of this truck, if you'll recall, the bid from TEC had been for $240,000 plus some change. That did not include the transmission we had specified, which is an Allison 4500 series. I asked for them to adjust their quote to put the Allison in the truck. We've had very good service life from these transmissions. They were proposing a Volvo transmission that frankly I didn't have the same level of confidence in. With that addition, they were still the low quote. $14,000 to me in the increase in the bid is worth it. We'd spend much more than that on the first transmission rebuild should the Volvo transmission not perform. So I'm recommending the award to TEC Equipment for a Volvo tandem truck for $254,032.
I'll move it.
Second the motion by Nelson. Any discussion? All's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item B is award the quote for the wheel loader and grapple bucket to Mid-Country Machinery for $284,550.
The low bid for this was from Riders for the Hyundai loader. We purchased a Hyundai last year from Riders. We've had problems with that, frankly, with the attachment of the quick coupler. We had Riders top management out in the field with us today. We think we're on the way to getting those problems rectified, but until we saw the performance of the Hyundai machine and the support that the dealer would be giving it, I didn't want to recommend them even though they were the low bid. The Hitachi was second low. We have a good record with working with Mid-Country, which is a Sioux City based, they have an office right here in Sioux City. We have other pieces of equipment that we've acquired from them. The grapple bucket is a demolition bucket we use for picking up trees and other material. This is a good addition to the equipment that we have down in District 5. That's where this machine's going to go. We did field test the Hitachi. We looked at, I sent staff to look at the current Series 7 in Des Moines, and then we were able to bring the Series 6, the prior machine, out to our own shop and work with it there and found it to be a satisfactory machine. So I'm recommending the award to Mid-Country Machinery. Combined price of grapple and loader, $284,550.
I'll move it.
I'll second the motion by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item C is award the quote for the tracked loader, grapple bucket, pallet forks, and counterweights to Murphy Equipment for $82,350 for the loader, $13,350 for the trailer, and $4,195 for the grapple bucket, $882 for the pallet forks, and $1,200 for 3 sets of counterweights.
Again, I'm recommending that we award to the second low bidder, which was Murphy Equipment, for the 331G series tracked loader. The low bid on this was from Titan Equipment for a case loader. Both conservation and secondary roads had our prior purchased case loaders in for engine rebuilds this year. They were both in the shop at the same time. We had just over 3,000 hours on it. It's really not satisfactory performance out of a diesel engine. For the extra $1,200, I'm recommending that we go with Murphy Equipment on the skid steer loader.
I'll move it.
I'll second the motion by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Item D is approval to allow the county engineer to hire up to 2 temporary equipment operators.
Each summer, we hire 5 individuals we look at as maintenance aides. These are usually college students. They provide flagging services for us. They trim around guardrail. They do mowing. Basically, most of what they're doing is they don't have a CDL, and we're putting money in pockets of college students during the summer. We're in the process of hiring the 3rd maintenance aide to help out with that mowing and flagging for this summer. We have 2 of the 3 positions filled. I'd like to move those other 2 positions to an equipment operator position, but at a lower rate than what we're paying our equipment operators. In the past, when we've hired temporary equipment operators, we have paid them probationary union scale. But that's for somebody who we're requiring to drive truck, who has at least a Class B CDL. In this case, I'd be happy with a farmer who knows how to run equipment to run that loader, or the tractor doing roadside mowing. Neither task requires a CDL, and I'd like to pay at a higher rate than my summer maintenance aides, but at a lower rate than I would pay an equipment operator. So I'm recommending that we advertise for 2 temporary equipment operators at $23 and $25 an hour. One we would put in the end loader. He'd be involved with our gravel road improvement program. That would free up one of my CDL drivers to drive a tandem truck or a semi and get that gravel on the road faster. The mower operator would be replacing an employee who is on extended medical leave. I'm expecting him to be out for 3 months. The territory that he usually mows is growing fast this year with all this rain. So we're looking for somebody to come in and be able to do that, so that I'm not having to pull another motor grader operator or equipment operator off of bigger tasks. So.
Okay. Questions?
Again, I would let the 2 summer maintenance aides go by the wayside. We pay more for these, but we're also looking at a 120-day temporary employee who would be performing some needed functions.
Very good. I'll move it.
Second.
Second by Nelson.
And this money's in your budget?
Pardon me?
The money for these people are in your budget?
I'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can. We have enough in the budget, just with staffing vacancies. When
Sure.
we're short an operator for 2 or 3 months, we have more than enough to cover the difference in cost between the maintenance aides and the temporary equipment operators.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you.
And with the equipment budget, just so the board knows, I had budgeted $1,250,000 for this year. I came in at $1,248,000 roughly. So we will not be buying the second foreman's pickup. The District 3 foreman's truck has just 112,000 miles on it. We can go 1 more season on it, and we'll pick that one up in next year's budget then.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 13 from Board Administration, Finance Director Dennis Butler for action. This is approval of letter of support for Koskovich and Murphy Development's application for the Iowa Workforce Housing Tax Credits.
This is the same letter of support we did last year, the board approved. There's no obligation whatsoever to Woodbury County. It's trying to help them as a support for the Iowa Workforce Housing Tax Credits. This letter will be forwarded tomorrow morning to Murphy, Kosovich Mercy Development to put with their application to the city, Sioux City, which then go to Deb Durham down in Economic Development in Iowa.
I'd move it.
Second?
Motion by Taylor, second by Nelson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 4-0. All right, item 14 from the Board of Supervisors for information. This is from myself. This is titled Information Updating the Public on Woodbury County's Filed Legal Brief with the Iowa Utilities Board, concluding that Summit's hazardous pipeline does not promote the public convenience and necessity. That language is taken from the conclusion of a 91-page filed brief with the IUB that shows what Woodbury County is doing at the state level through our legal counsel. That is Mr. Timothy Whipple with Ehlers and Cooney in Des Moines. Many of you probably remember last week, Mr. Doyle Turner brought up a potential Bremer County resolution. I did contact our legal counsel and found that language is almost identical to a Franklin County objection letter filed last year with the IUB, also written by the same attorney. So it makes sense that there was that agreement there. And in speaking with Doyle, we agreed that the substance of these documents is replicated, and even more so, in Woodbury County's already filed brief, which should be shared. And I found it interesting to me personally, since, talking with Doyle and other activists, this wasn't known at that point, that this report had been filed or where to find it. I was told by Mr. Whipple that this is a public document, but not a lot of people know where to find it. And so I think it's very helpful to include this 91-page document in our backup and request that the public share it and see and be advised of what Woodbury County is doing with other counties in collaboration. Those include, we are the largest of the group of counties that are signing on to this brief, but also includes Shelby County, Kossuth, Floyd, Emmett, Dickinson, and Wright. And this has been filed with the Iowa Utilities Board late last year. And again, I encourage the public to share this. And as for the board's input, I wouldn't expect the board to necessarily have detailed responses to questions about this, because this is obviously filed by a subject matter expert that the county has vetted and signed on with. But I'll highlight that Woodbury County's efforts at the IUB with this brief are a direct attempt to effect the grant of a permit and any invalid use of eminent domain, which I believe we all agree this represents an invalid use of eminent domain potential. So, any board discussion? Mr. Nelson?
Thanks for bringing that up, Matthew. And I know if anybody that's been on the IUB website, it is confusing, it is hard to navigate. And so I enjoyed looking through this. I'm going to look through it some more. Sorry to Doyle for bringing that up and doing a bunch of work for something that we already had, that we should have been more on the ball and shared that. But I hope that you guys take it and share it. And just, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, because we should have done it sooner, but I'm glad that we got it done now, so.
And a lot of these, if you read through it, a lot of these points are made in other objections and briefs, and obviously Mr. Whipple represents other counties outside of this list. And also resolutions county boards have filed or passed or things like that. But it's really good to share, because it's all in one document. I mean, it's all there. There's a lot of citations. There's a lot of arguments. I believe the board agrees with, of course, and I think it's, again, helpful that Woodbury County is the largest county in this filing. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you as well for putting this together, and anytime you can bring constituencies as diverse as the Sierra Club and Steve King together, it's a good day. So just short of nailing these 95 pages to the IUB, could I just, this one sentence, I think at the end, I think should be read, or a couple sentences. In the conclusion, it says, this project is a textbook example of a boondoggle. A boondoggle is a wasteful and worthless project undertaken for political, corporate, or personal gain, typically a government project funded by taxpayers. So I thought that was artfully written and well done. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in here. And Doyle, do you have any, you look like you're getting up, so.
Doyle Turner, 2738 200 Street, Mobile. Thank you very much for sharing this. I was not aware that this was out there, and I've studied a lot of this stuff. Even though it's 91 pages, it's actually, for this type of subject, very concise and very direct and to the point, and not as hard to read with legal ease as what you see in a lot of legal documents like this. My compliments to Timothy Whipple and his staff for putting this together, because this probably does explain the convenience and necessary issue with this problem. That's the legal realm that the Summit has a bar to meet that they haven't really attempted to meet. And this document probably relays that better than any other document. The other thing is it talks about the zoning issues with the county that Summit is just glossing over and didn't really take any action at the IUB to explain how they were going to meet. I mean, they're actually going through the Avenue of the Saints park in Charles City, right through the industrial park that Charles City just spent a bunch of money to develop. There is no, it's very egregious that they don't care whose property they deal with. And this does not benefit us as a state. It will not save ethanol because ethanol doesn't need to be saved. This is just strictly a boondoggle like you read. So thank you very much. Can this be attached to the website so people could get it easily?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to read some of the headings in the table of contents just to give the public an idea if they don't want to read this all right now. The sort of topics it covers, the first of the major headings is applicable law, noting that the federal and Iowa constitutions restrict the use of eminent domain in certain cases. And then it goes to Summit has not proven that the project promotes the public convenience and necessity and a permit should not be granted. There's arguments and subpoints to that. Then Summit is not a common carrier and the board should refuse to grant eminent domain rights. And then the board should withhold approval of the route until Summit complies with certain routing requirements which have not been met. And then the permit should contain certain conditions and restrictions protective of landowners and public safety. And that's where that fail-safe comes in. If there is a route, then it needs to be respective of several points to protect public safety. Any other discussion on this?
Well, I think one thing that's interesting from the report is that it notes that the Iowa Supreme Court ruled in there that indirect economic benefits is not used for eminent domain, and that's what Summit is trying to argue. Somehow they're saving the planet, and the Supreme Court already said no, it's not valid. So it's just very interesting. I encourage everyone to read that. It's very interesting, and I agree with Doyle. It was very specific and to the point, which I think was very helpful. And Mr. Whipple did a very good job laying out the case against eminent domain. So
Yeah, I'm very pleased with what our contribution has done. Obviously, we're cost sharing this representation, which I think is effective, and along with several other counties. So, any other input on this item from anyone?
Deb Main, 1026 Charles Avenue. And that is true. First Summit said that we are going to save the environment, and so that didn't pan out. So then they are going to save ethanol, and now they're moving on to sustainable aviation fluid, which isn't going to work either. But the bar that the Utilities Board has set is public use and convenience, which they have to prove they meet that bar, which I don't think they can. But I wondered if you were going to file that. They recently added 14 laterals to the first project, and the Utilities Board will not combine that into the original application. And so they're going to do 16 separate hearings and dockets. So if you're sending this to the Utilities Board, you may want to file that on all of the dockets for the project.
Thank you.
I was just gonna say that we have two people in the room that have dedicated a lot of time to this. And along with this, if people wanna read this, I would encourage them to go onto YouTube, and there are plenty of Woodbury County residents that testified at the IUB hearings and some from neighboring counties that did an incredible job. So I think we appreciate that we're doing what we can and that we have citizens doing everything that they can, and that's a really powerful thing, so. But there are some really great, great clips on YouTube. You can go on there and find Woodbury County residents and speaking their piece at an IUB hearing, so check that out too.
Yeah. Another excerpt I think is helpful to read in light of what we've been talking about with zoning is page 36. It says, additionally, Summit's sweeping generalizations about land use and the failure to specifically address comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances are clearly attempts to avoid discussing the specific requirements of these plans and ordinances. For example, the zoning ordinances in Shelby, Cassuth, Emmett, Floyd, Dickinson, Wright, Woodbury, and Hardin counties all require a permit in order to use agricultural land for purposes of industrial use, including a pipeline, and all did so at the time Summit filed its petition. Some of the requirements are general in nature and some are specific. And then it's defers to a direct testimony of Hamilton County, and this testimony demonstrates the inaccuracy of Summit's general statements about county zoning ordinances and what they require. So I like that it respects the, all aspects of the argument in one complete package, so. Very good. Any other input on this item? Thank you. Please distribute. It will be available in the minutes. We can also make it available, easy to find on the website and recent news. Karen will help me with that. And go from there. All right, moving on. Item 15 is reports on committee meetings.
Sorry about that. We had an LEC meeting this afternoon, and I actually had an impromptu LEC tour this morning. Supervisor Bittinger went as well. So there was kind of some good news, bad news out of the LEC meeting today. We pushed the substantial completion date back 2 weeks, and that's to account for the slow response from our engineer, the architect's engineer in Troba, as far as some design issues that we're working through on the testing and balancing. But the good news is that the tour that we had today, there's not a whole lot going on out of the jail other than the actual work being done on this last delay. It was the first time in all of our tours, especially for me, that most of the areas we went into that we had to turn the lights on and had to unlock the doors because there's nobody working. And there's nobody working because they're completed. So that was a great thing to see. The judges' quarters, the state has brought their technology, computers, printers, that sort of thing for the judges, and we're waiting for the state IT staff to come and install those in the judges' offices. You got things like TVs and monitors that Woodbury County Building Services will be putting up yet. So there are little minor things here or there. They were replacing some of the front doors that had been beaten up and dinged up by contractors coming and going through the duration of the project. But outside of that, in elevator 6, there really wasn't a whole lot. A lot of the areas are punched, cleaned. They look great. The courtrooms look great.
Yep.
They've got all the placards and signage and things on the walls. So there was just a lot of great things that we appreciated that so many sections of it are done, and the few areas that are this last delay, this most recent delay, are pretty isolated. And those areas are already ready for work. A lot of those are valves and air boxes up in the ceiling, and so they've removed the tiles and that kind of structure, so they are ready when those components come in, that they can just put them in and get done. So I guess, Dan, if you wanted to add anything from what we saw today.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, well, I just agree with you, right? It's just a massive building, and just seeing the improvements in just 3 months, it's ready to go, other than a few cleaning, right, the few balancing and things they need to do. But no, it's just it was just good to see the forward progress, and I know we're all we're all ready for this thing to be done and open, but it is right there, and that was just good for, I think, for you and I to see that. And
Well,
just
like
being able to work on
the
it.
Sally Port, which is
Oh, yeah. Yep.
the big 2-stall garage on the side, has pretty much been the staging area for contractors and subs with their equipment and tools and that sort of thing. And that's pretty much been full every time.
Right.
And today was
Em-
pretty much
yeah,
empty. I
yeah.
mean, so it's just great that they're moving on, they're getting things wrapped up. And so we hope that we have some final answers come out of Entroba this week to answer our last few of their design errors and how we can fix them. And then we can get this thing wrapped up and get in there,
Yeah.
so.
No, overall it was good. I would think I would say it was a good, positive, tour to show that it's almost there. So.
And then the other thing I had, not LEC related, was the Conservation Board had a meeting 2 weeks ago. I forgot to talk about this last week, but they're working on running fiber internet out to Little Sioux Park. Kind of for a slew of reasons. One, the cell service down there is horrible. And so there's kind of an emergency aspect of it if we can have access to Wi-Fi calling, text messaging, that sort of thing. Two, it's good for the workers to be able to connect to different things when they need to do their job. And then to be able to take some payments electronically. It's a better accounting system for the department. And I think they're gonna have an avenue for people staying out there to be able to use that too and upgrade just their camping experience down at Little Sioux Park. And we continue to get rain, and so the swim pond is going to be open out there, and everybody's really excited to have that back going. So I think the septic work, I believe, is all done, and I think they are open and ready and gonna be ready for this Memorial Weekend. So get out and camp.
All right, hearing no other reports on committee meetings, item 16 is citizen concerns. Are there any citizen concerns?
My name is Craig Levine. I live at 5003 Morningside Avenue, Sioux City, Iowa. I'm a Woodbury County voter and taxpayer. Mr. Taylor, when Woodbury County made national news, I was not proud. The fact that the wife of a Board of Supervisor member was charged with 52 counts of voter fraud was not a sad day. It was a very sad day. For the last few years, we've been hearing about election integrity and stop the steal. Yet it was a local Republican election that had the fraud. Now that your wife has been again her sentence, I hope you had time to reflect. I feel bad about the situation your family is in. Your kids need the mother at home. Your wife's choices and your political ambitions got in the way of your family. Thank you for your service in the National Guard, but as a chaplain, you have tarnished the religious and government leaders. These positions should be role models for our communities and our children. Unfortunately, in recent years, it has not. Woodbury County deserves better. We all deserve better. I admire that 3 of your Board of Supervisor colleagues have taken a stand and asked you to step down. They are true leaders in the community. I voted for them in the past, and I'll probably vote for them in the future. They went across party lines and stood for what is right and against what is wrong. Jeremy Taylor, you are listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. Your wife was convicted of 52 counts of voter fraud. What your wife did is wrong, and what you are doing is wrong. Jeremy Taylor, you used the word, you are wrong for Woodbury County. I'm concerned that one of your fellow colleagues has remained silent. That worries me a lot. Why has he remained silent? I also thank God that we have a county auditor who did the right thing. He saw voter fraud, he reported it. That's what a true American auditor is supposed to do. He made sure everyone can vote, is his right to vote, and he heard and listened. Not letting somebody take away that vote from them, like you family did. I'm asking you, Jeremy Taylor, to do the right thing and step down. Your kids need you at home now, and Woodbury County deserves better. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen concerns?
My name is Jaylee Hurst, and I am not a Woodbury County voter. However, I'm here to represent Woodbury County voters. In particular, Sheila Thompson.
Sorry, name and address.
Oh, sorry. So Jaylee Hurst, 3038 South Lakeport Street, is UFCW Local 222.
Thank you.
In regards to Sheila Thompson, she states that as a Woodbury County voter, I'm not here on behalf of myself. I'm representing workers all over Western Iowa through my role as a delegate to the Western Iowa Labor Federation. On Friday, we learned that one of our county supervisor's wives reported to federal prison. She was convicted by a jury of her peers on 52 counts of voter fraud. As a Woodbury County taxpayer, it is beyond frustrating that our tax dollars are still being used to pay the salary of the supervisor who benefited from that fraud to cheat in the election for the seat he now holds. It is way past time for him to resign that seat. But in addition, we have one-party control over our Board of Supervisors, and that party is the party that has been jumping up and down screaming about voter fraud for years, and passing laws in Iowa to make voting more difficult for disabled Iowans, older Iowans, rural Iowans, and low-income Iowans. all while claiming these restrictions will solve an unproven problem of rampant voter fraud. Yet when actual voter fraud occurs, many in that party are noticeably silent. We appreciate that 3 out of 5 of our county supervisors have in the past urged Mr. Taylor to resign his office, given the criminal convictions against a vital member of his campaign. It defies belief that Mr. Taylor did not know the actions of his wife were taking place on his behalf, and even if he didn't, the buck should stop with the candidate. However, Supervisor Radig has been noticeably silent on these serious times. Now, the one supervisor who has refused to condemn this voter fraud is running to be Woodbury County's auditor and to administer our future elections. How can someone with so little regard for voter integrity be trusted with such an important function? We do not believe he can. We call on Supervisor Taylor to resign and Supervisor Radig to drop out of the race for county auditor. Whether supporting voter fraud through complicity or disregard, neither is acceptable.
Thank you. Are there any other citizen concerns? Seeing none. Item 17, any board concerns?
The only one I have is, Mr. Chairman, where are we at with the MEIs? Are we, that process?
Yes, they should be starting if they haven't already.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
right,
we'll
so-
get an update on that tomorrow, I'm sure.
okay, all right. I think it's just a couple constituents asked me just when they were starting and what's, is that immediate, so effective?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right,
as soon as possible.
Sure, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you very much. So the LEC Authority put out a press release today, and it said the end of July. I just wondered, beyond that, you said you're thinking about 30 days would be typical to be able to move in? Is that what your understanding is?
That's
I just-
would be up to the sheriff's department item.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially, we could, September 1st, we could be up and rolling potentially, is that?
As far as moving in, that's really up to the sheriff's department on how much training those officers would need to have before inmates could go there, or when they would need to. I mean, when they go to move, it's gonna be all hands on deck, because not only do they have the inmates, but then they've got all their supplies, and we've still got, there's some fixtures from the kitchen at the current LEC that we're gonna move out there. You've got the evidence that's gotta move out there. And so there are some things that have to move, but that's, the sheriff's department is handling that. I would say that the only positive is that while we've been waiting on these fixes from Introba for their mistakes, we've been able to backwalk and punch a lot of these items. And so typically with a substantial completion date, you have backwalks and punches that continue on for 30 to 45 days afterwards, doing a lot of these small fixes. It's my opinion that I think a lot of those small fixes have already happened. So I don't know that when we hit substantial completion that there's gonna be a lot left to do on the building. But as far as when the sheriff's office will move in or what they'll do, that's totally in their court.
Okay. And just by way of board concern, if I may? So we're on item 17?
Yes.
Okay. So that's one thing I just want to mention publicly, and I want this to not be, this is not a criticism of our Board of Supervisors or the LAC Authority, so please hear me preface that. Woodbury County right now, based on not being able to get in probably until September 1st and realizing revenue, we have about $532,000 that we have budgeted that won't be able to be realized. We learned today over $400,000 that we are still being charged by ACH for medical services because we paid a contract. That's nearly $1 million. And then we talked before about a couple $100,000 in insurance. All of this is to say we are being damaged severely, not by the fault of this board, not by the fault of the LEC Authority, but I just want to highlight when we're having to push back and the LEC Authority is putting out that press release that it's the end of July. We're not going in July 29th. It'd probably be more like September 1st, and those damages are racking up. I also had one other question, if I could, or comment, and this, Dennis, is a question for you. You mentioned a couple of weeks back that there's $25,000 roughly a month that we're paying for legal that had been coming out of the liability fund for self-insurance. you had mentioned moving that, and I'm referring to John Templer, under the Board of Supervisors. Is that something that's happened at this point, or something that will happen in the future? Does that take board action to happen?
Yes, the expenditures have been transferred over general basic where they should be, because he's an employee of the Board of Supervisors. Second, we are gonna amend the budget, next week to cover those expenditures.
And will that be in there, that move of having
Yes.
John Templer funded, not from the self-insurance liability fund?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But no, you're right, and I'm glad you said that. Substantial completion date does not mean move-in date. You know, those are two different things, and when we talk about the damages, it's easy to think about attorney fees, legal fees, costs for repairs and fixes, you know, things we had to add to the jail that were the result of a design flaw. But there are damages far-reaching more than that. I mean, there are. I mean, extra staff, lost revenue, the ACH that we just found out about from the sheriff's office, lost commissary. There are lots of things that we are being damaged on the authority side, on the county side, which is, in the end, it's still one pot of money. But there are a lot of damages, and we are working very hard to keep track of all this, so.
Appreciate it.
I have one more. This question is from Mark. From Mark, if you can come to the mic, I have a question. Won't take long. It's not a long question. Have you ever, I have a question. Have you ever heard of the agency called Go Rail? They're an agency that, that helps counties get grants to help improve railroad crossings or eliminate those altogether. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard about different projects and grants that have been encouraged by the rail. We got a BNSF communication. It didn't mention Go Rail as an entity, but it did mention their interest in cooperating in some of these grant projects.
Okay.
The only place we really have any rail left in county jurisdiction is running right along Highway 75.
Right, yeah.
You know, a couple of years ago, we had the request from Iowa DOT to take out a couple of our overpasses over I-29. You know, at that time, they were offering an incentive of almost $1.5 million per bridge had we taken one or both of them down. You know, we gave up that money, instead had them raised, recognizing that a lot of our property owners need those. Where I see Go Rail being of perhaps usefulness to us, and I was going to attend their webinar that's coming up at the end of the month. Supervisor Nelson also sent me a copy of that information. One of the things in getting a letter of cooperation from the Union Pacific Railroad, which operates the rail parallel to the old 75 right-of-way, is that they would like to see us do some advanced planning for the next stage of development around the new interchange. They would like to see us at some point in time transition to a grade separated crossing at that location. And they've expressed some interest in assisting us with grant applications, possibly even financially, to take a look at some of those items. I've approached the city of Sergeant Bluff to start talking about that too. And there are rail study grants out there that would be applicable to that. And I'm hoping that some of the information I pick up from Go Rail would be helpful in getting those.
Okay, I was just wondering if it would be worth it signing up for that webinar.
Yeah, Sergeant Bluff is very interested in working with that next stage of development, because the T intersection that we have on the east side of the new interchange site, I believe is going to extend east into a new road at some point in time. I mean, that's the logical area where we're going to see Sergeant Bluff growing either industrial or residential as they work within the development agreements between Sioux City and Sergeant Bluff for the land that surrounds that new interchange. And that rail part of it is really going to be key. You know, again, we were fortunate in getting a Union Pacific Railroad endorsement of our project. They've been hesitant to do that for at-grade rail crossings. even one that's getting significant safety upgrades as we're providing as part of the interchange project. But working with Sergeant Bluff, I think there is value in taking a look at what's the next step. Do we have to perhaps get some options to buy ground beyond the existing Highway 75 right-of-way so that we have a landing point for the potential for future roads or for safety improvements above at-grade rail at that location. So I appreciated getting the email, and I'm looking into getting there for that webinar.
Okay.
Short question, long answer.
Yeah,
Taylor.
sorry about that.
No,
but-
no, man.
But, you know, there's a lot of wheels in motion that came out of the grant writing process that are still continuing efforts. I'm getting ready to contact our two senators to see if we can maybe get some attention from Department of Commerce, for instance, out on the site of the new interchange, as some of those other federal departments do provide some input to the Secretary of Transportation when they might be weighing a couple of different projects and maybe tip the scales in our balance. So
Okay.
we're continuing to work even though the grant has been submitted.
Gotcha, okay. No, thank you. I just want to make sure that was a good use of time,
Yeah.
not one of those weird webinars.
I really haven't had a lot of chance to report to you on some of that, so.
Okay.
Good opportunity. Thank you.
Okay.
Mark, I know this is literally a once-in-a-lifetime kind of opportunity, but from what you've heard or what you know of other interstate justifications, what's the timeline look like in terms of when we'll know yay or nay? Does this roll over into future years in terms of federal funding and say, well, not this year, but maybe next?
Yeah.
How does that all work?
The timetable for the project, which is a January 26th letting for the interchange, puts us in a position where we only have one opportunity to go after the RISE and the infra grants.
No retroactive applicability? You can't do it?
No.
Okay.
It typically takes 6 to 9 months to get a grant agreement to spend the money in place after it's awarded. So the Federal Highway has been running about 90 days on the review process. So I'm expecting we'll hear August or September as to whether or not we were successful on the grant application. That then gives us about a year ahead of final plan turn-in to get all of the grant agreements in place to allow that money to be there to pay for the interchange in January 2026. So the good thing that came out of this, though, is fiscal year 2025 and 2026 money, the last 2 years of the current federal aid program, are available to us in that grant. So we're in at a point in time where we have the opportunity to draw from a bigger pool of money. So yet, effectively, we got 2 fiscal years to draw the money from, but, the application period is tighter, which I think works for us in this case, because we do have the opportunity for 26 money without filing an application in 26.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board concerns?